Today I have as my special guest, Jimmy Tomczak. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we love having you on the show. You've been on here a few other times to talk about different things about your business, starting way back when you were in your early 20s, right out of school at U of M. But today we're having you on the show to talk about your new book. Before we get started with that, though, let's talk a little bit about you and who you are and how you got to be where you are here today.
Sure.
Which is a long story, but let's start.
Sure. So my name's Jimmy Tomczak. Most recently, I wrote a book about inspiration. But where that came to me was from my business life and love adventures over the last, 5 years, more or less. And I wanted to take the time to put that into a story that can help other people live their best life now.
And let's talk a little bit about your background, because you kind of have an interesting background when it comes
Sure.
to your schooling at University of Michigan. What did you study, and how did that kind of influence who you are today?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Michigan. I studied neuroscience. I was going to go to med school. I actually chose not to and started my own company. And at the time, that was a minimalist sandal company that made footwear out of billboard vinyl. So we took the giant roadside banners that you see driving down the road and made shoes out of them. And I took that from crazy idea, kind of sewing them in my mom's living room, to selling them around the world, being selected to appear and taped for Shark Tank, and traveling, adventuring, connecting, and really finding out, what it takes to run a business, who to connect with, how to connect with, and how to put all that together. Ultimately, that business failed. But failure, or if you choose to call it that, is just a learning experience, and that's probably one of my number one things that I love to do, is just learn. And so everything that I get involved with is always just an opportunity to grow, and this most recent book is no exception.
And what's really interesting is that you decided to study neuroscience, which is about the mind and how the mind works and all that sort of thing. And you look at the mind and all the different like neurons and things coming out from the mind. It's all like the tendrils and all the different things that you're doing in your life. It's kind of like a metaphor for that. It's kind of neat when you look at it from that standpoint. And the other thing was, of course, being on Shark Tank. What a great opportunity and experience. It's super difficult to get on there, as we've talked about, and just the thousands of people that apply, and just getting through those moments. And I do love that shot, that one picture I did see of Mark Cuban and the shoes, because we had originally had you on the show to talk about paper feet.
It seems like it was just a couple days ago.
I know, it does, but
right?
it was just in your early 20s,
right.
doing that, which was great. And you're right, it is an experience. It's just a big experiment, and life is a big experiment. So it's all experiences, just little experiments in the lab, in Tommy's lab.
Lab. I mean, so the thing about the shoes is what I would tell people. So eventually I came up with that idea because I lived out by the lake, and I would love to just barefoot or get around in that. And at the time, Vibram's 5 Finger is very popular. Also, barefooting and minimalist and recycling, all these intersecting things. And so
those look very uncomfortable. Those types of things.
Some people didn't like those. I'm not going to spend $100 on a pair of shoes that looks like that, basically. So I'm like, well, I can do better, and that's I think the ethos of an entrepreneur is like, how can this be done better? How can I solve a problem? A lot of times, the best entrepreneurs are people solving it for themselves first, and then finding a way to have that impact the world. Of course, that's not the right or the wrong way to do it. That's just one way to do it. But for me, ultimately, yes, I did the shoes and invented that and patented that and then commercialized it. But more importantly than that, founding the company around it, Tombolo at the time, was the intention for that was to get outside and live. That was the reason for being for that company. And when the shoes ultimately didn't quite work out, and then we tried some different products, from bags and accessories to just, okay, like, what, why does this exist? Why are we doing this? And it came back to, like, that's what I wanted people to do. Like, you don't even need a pair of shoes to just get outside and run around. But of course, that was helping people do that at the time. What I found out was that, like, I can just start with that. And how can I encourage people to do that? Get outside, eat well, run around or exercise or move your body in some purposeful way. Have the important conversations with the people that you want to have important conversations with. Because to me, and then ultimately, like, defining success. So at the time, when I set out to start this company, for the shoes, right? So I wanted basically like fame and fortune. I'm like, I mean, right? It's like if you can see Crocs or Toms or Uggs or these different shoes that are out there, and I'm like, coming from a background where that was that was not the case for me. It's like, well, what would it take to do that? And I didn't know, but I set out to find it, and of course, enjoying that entire process was like what that was all about. Ultimately, I realized that doesn't really matter. Those things, fame, fortune, success, or whatever, that's a product of the process.
Right.
And then
right.
so I kind of turned back towards that after I let all of that go. And what I found that was most important in all of this was the people that I had met along the way. And then so I started to have more like deeper conversations about, I mean, it could have been anything from how we live and spirituality and all these other things. And then as I was doing this, because this was when I was transitioning out of those entrepreneurial adventures into whatever was next.
Right.
And at the time I didn't know, but I'd write and I'd journal about this. And those early writings became ultimately what I then began to publicly blog about. Mm-hmm. And then that blog became the very foundational framework for this book. And finally, over a year ago now, I got really just dedicated to like sitting down and, okay, yes, you're doing a lot of other projects and there's a lot of other excitement going on, but this book is something I can't not do. And if I don't sit down and really commit to it right now and let some of the other stuff go, then it's not going to get done. And so I with that commitment, focus, and effort, I said, all right, this is happening. And now, over a year later, here we are.
And what's really interesting is that you've compressed a lot of like what maybe somebody would get to in their 60s or whatever when they're going to retire, and then they start looking back of, maybe I should have done this, or I should have done that, or maybe it really was about the people and the relationships and this and that. It's nice that you're compressing that experience and having that at this point in your life, so that you're free up to do even other things in your life, because you're coming to those realizations fast and early. Yeah. And not waiting to have 40 years of experience behind you to then reflect back. Because that's saving you a lot of time and allowing you to open up to new opportunities. And a business, well, you mentioned failure, but just an experiment. Those things teach you a lot. They form who you are, and they also get you over that fear thing, because there is no fear because you've done it. You lived through it. You lived past it. So lots of great things come out of that. And the funny thing is, if you hadn't done the shoe thing, I don't even know how I found you online. I have no idea. I can't remember way back when. But then I wouldn't have met you,
Right.
And then we wouldn't have had, like a couple years ago, I remember having that long talk and walk about, we must have walked like 20 miles talking about all these things, and like talking about the book. And I remember like, what's your commit date?
Yeah.
And I mean,
Oh my
I
gosh.
remember that. It's like, here we are. Now we have a book.
Right.
And it's like, it's amazing. I love seeing how these things just unfold. I mean, you must love it too, but I love it. I mean, I enjoy it too, because it's so cool to watch what somebody else is doing in their world,
You gotta love the process. I mean,
Yeah.
commitment for me, I was gonna say commitment's like a challenge for me, but that's not
really a
true,
challenge.
because look what I've done.
Yeah.
What's a challenge is not committing to so many
Right.
different things, because the most
Right.
successful people are relentless about one thing,
Right.
or maybe two.
Right.
For me, it might be three,
Right.
or whatever. But knowing that and knowing right now my definition of success, okay, and that's doing what matters with the people who matter most. Success for me is doing what matters with the people who matter most. And that can be a lot of different things, but ultimately, I mean, the book is a book, but we talked about like launch events and launch parties, or different ways to bring people together. And it's like, yeah, great, I wrote this book, but this is beyond like
Right.
me or the book, or
Right.
like what, like the way that I previously went about it. I guess now it's like, hey, how can we get some of the best and brightest in the room and share some of these wow moments? Because to me, that's what gets people excited. And if you're excited, if you can find a way to whatever happens at that level of excitement, you can then continue on to build, because excitement doesn't last forever. Passion will go up and down,
Right.
and that's something I want to take from the book to share with the audience, is that there's these natural cycles of abundance in life and love and business. So we know the entrepreneurial roller coaster, we know these highs, and then there's going to be an equally low, whatever you want to call that,
Right.
the opposite.
Right.
And it doesn't even need a label if you don't want it. Just know that there's going to be that flow, and if you embrace both equally, then you truly can attempt to live your best life now. But that's not even easy for me, because this book is designed. I feel like I have to read it every so often, because I wrote it with all of those details. It's kind of it kind of bit off a lot, but it chunks it down into the way that you can read it cover to cover and get the full gist of all of it, or you can open it to any one page with an intention in mind or a challenge that you're experiencing right now, and then you'll get exactly what you need in that moment.
And I just want to show what the book looks like. It's called Lakeside Tide, and on the back it says Inspire. It's got a really interesting cover. We're going to talk about the different pieces of this book, because the whole thing and how it came to be is kind of interesting. But this is like textured. And are these stars? Or are these sand? Or
how would you interpret them?
I thought they were stars. Even
Okay.
though it says Lakeside and Tide, it could
Sure.
be like, inside a little bitty piece of sand is the whole world. But to me, it was like, I thought of stars. I always think of the sky. And I love on the back it says Inspire. And it's a really solid book. And it's just so other people know how it was actually delivered to me, when you gave me a review copy for me to read, was it came in a box, and inside the box was crinkle paper the color of sand. And it was so wonderful. And I took pictures of it and I put it up on Facebook. It was like so neat, because it was like a whole experience of just opening it and having this book just sitting on what was like the beach. And I love the beach. I grew up near the beach in California. So it was like, oh my gosh, there was even an experience in opening the box. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you printed the book, because that was an experience. You didn't just go to Create Space on Amazon and make this happen. What did you do when you made it all special? Every piece of this had something special and different about it.
Yes. So this is all printed in Michigan locally. It was done on an offset press, like has been done for 100 years. Of course, now with the new technology, of course. But the intention was to create something that, like it's sitting right here, a very nice coffee table style book that would look as good as it does just sitting out here as it would whether I'm reading it. So the quality of the pages, the type of print, the cover, the design. You'll notice that this doesn't actually have a dust jacket. Why?
Right.
Well, what happens when you have a dust jacket? People take it off and they set it aside, or they forget about it, or it gets all wrinkled and nasty and that kind of thing. So I said, well, how can that be done in a different way? How can you reinvent the book for those, so you can take it with you to the beach and have it get beat up and that kind of thing. I mean, there's exercises in here for each, but I wouldn't call this a workbook. If you do the work, yes, you can call it that, but it's designed such that it would be great for a bookshelf or for legacy, that you don't have to worry about it. It's not something that you're just going to buy and then read once and then forget about it. And I feel like that's what's happening a lot with kind of the current state of publishing. So if you publish a digital version of a book, on Amazon, you can click another button, and then Create Space will give you the option to print a paperback or a hardcover version. And they're like the lowest quality books printed wherever you can actually order, because they're printed basically on demand.
Right.
You can order, you can hit a button and they'll come from different places. And so when you get them, let's say your friend ordered one and this, and the tolerances are off on the side of the pages, and they might be printed in different locations, so they might look like physically different.
I did not know that they could print them in different locations.
Yep.
I did not know that.
So if you pick up a book from Amazon and you'll look on one of the last pages, has like a little barcode, and it'll tell you the state where it was printed. And so they have different, just like they have server farms and things like that. They have different places where they're printed. And so I basically wanted to let go of all of that. And this is an interesting kind of business perspective for anybody that watches this show and really wants to get into the nitty-gritty details of a business. This, on the bottom here, it says Wet Star, okay? And if you look at any other book on your shelf, or there's a couple here, you'll see like a little logo and then the name, and that's the publisher. Okay, so who's the publisher? Is it Random House? Is it this? Is it a major publishing company? And so then you flip to this. Well, Wet Star? Oh, I see that's Detroit-based. okay, and this book does look like it. I've never heard of that. They must be a new or a smaller publishing company. White Star Press. Okay, I see that. That's actually my company. Okay, and the reason that's done like that is because if for Amazon, if you do it on Amazon, and even if you do want a hardcover or something like that, the distribution doesn't work. It doesn't play nice with a lot of the bookstores out there. So right now, this book is in several bookstores in Michigan, and we're working on national distribution. Okay. But if it was done through Amazon, I wouldn't have been able to do that. If it was done through a self-published way of doing it, this is not I mean, yes, it's self-published in the sense that my company did it and I wrote it and I was the one that was doing all of this kind of stuff, but it acts as if I worked with a large publisher and they went through that and then they created this, and that opens it up for more opportunities to do other things, whether it's awards or library distribution or distribution through major booksellers. And then the Amazon and everything else is just a bonus. So beyond that, I'll also be doing the Amazon launch, which is a digital version, which has a totally different ISBN, totally different cover, and specifically dedicated for people that want to read it online and only want that. But the way this came into being was through actually a Kickstarter and through the community, and with the specific intention of me being on video saying, this is why this exists, this is what we're trying to achieve, and here's how you can support. And then when I was able to, hit go on the Kickstarter, I knew that, okay, this is going to work, and here's why. But I had to do all my homework, behind the scenes, and that's why that takes so long, because everything we just talked about had nothing to do with actually writing the words to the book.
There's a lot of work on it. Yeah. Right. And I remember the Kickstarter video, which was amazing. That was an amazing video that was put together. Some of the pictures from your travels and videos from your travels. I mean, it was amazing putting that all together. And so you got the money on the Kickstarter to get this out there. How big a print run did you do? Because this is not print on demand. You had to do a print run, meaning you had to do a group of books at one time. So what was your first print run?
Well, I tried to get it as low as possible, so that the cost would be as low as possible.
Right.
But when you want the quality as high as possible, that's still going to be several hundred copies. But I was able to shop around, talk to a lot of different printers, and ultimately find one in Ann Arbor that's printed some of my favorite New York Times bestsellers. So it's really cool. You go into this publisher, and that's what I wanted too. Is I wanted somewhere where I could go there, talk to someone, see their process. I actually walked through the factory tour, saw my book coming off the press and getting stamped and all this other stuff. And then now they have the little test copies in their little library where if someone were going to do that, somebody watching this wanted to make their book a reality, they could go to Sheridan in Ann Arbor and go and sit there and then look at all the different books, because all the different books that have ever been printed, at least the most recent ones, they have in their little library conference room and with copies. So you can kind of pull one off the shelf and then you'll open it up and it'll say, okay, printed with this letter stock and this type of this and that, and okay, so I like this paper, but I like this, and you can kind of get an idea. Okay, I want my book to be this size, but I want it to have this color cover, and I want it to have this, and then you can kind of get an idea.
Piece it all together.
Which is totally different than what I thought it would be. I thought I'd be able to say look, I want a book that's 5x7 and this with this stuff, and then they'd be able to go get me a sample of that, and that was not the case. This actually came into being through the process of writing it again and again and again, and eventually printing a manuscript and then editing that and then printing it again and then printing another version. But before this was even like this, I did print a very small run of a paperback so that you could experience it as a book, how it would feel as far as the size and everything else, through what was called the Espresso Book Machine at the University of Michigan, which was sort of an on-demand publishing platform where you provide them a file and in 10 minutes they print out your book.
Is that for students?
It's actually for anyone, but they're actually not doing the same version of that anymore. But it can be done. There's other services that do that, and I'd actually recommend that, because even with this, I wish there's still things that I would change or that I would do differently about this, and going through that whole process and understanding how it all works now. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship.
Now, from the standpoint of being an entrepreneur who wrote a book, do you suggest this for most people? And if they can't do the writing, what about outsourcing it, like using a ghostwriter? What do you recommend?
Well, go back to, we talked about earlier commitment. And so commitment, what am I doing? But more importantly, why am I doing it? And how long can I stand to do it? I guess that's kind of a silly thing to say,
no,
but
it's like,
it's like there are the things that, I mean, the things that excite me about doing something like this, and then now you have it, and then I have to, maintain excitement and passion and everything else about, okay, getting this out there, sales, the marketing, the everything else. So would I recommend a ghostwriter? Well, I mean, it depends on who's watching. If you have zero time, but you have a bunch of money, well, yeah, of course. I mean, if it's something, get it done. But I'll tell a story, a brief one. I sat down with one of my good friends who's a best-selling author now, and he's actually on a national book tour. He runs a company in Ann Arbor, and we were sitting down. We kind of have like a mentor-mentee friend kind of relationship, and he said, when do you think, when's the best time to write a book? I mean, should I do this now or later? And he says,
yesterday.
well, you're not really going to know the best time because, he's 30 years older than I am, and so he has a family and kids and everything else, and went through everything that I just went through. But he has different challenges than I would have, so I might not have the same financial means or focus or even just life experience to put into that book. But yet I did have the time and the commitment to it to pull it off, and ultimately we both did the same thing. So there is no right or wrong time to start. The key is just going for it, but don't go for it unless you're going to be able to go for it all the way through 3 years. Say, can I do this thing? It doesn't have to be a book, it can be anything.
Right.
Can I commit to this for 3 years and be happy with who I am and what I'm doing for the next 3 years? The answer is yes, do it.
In your book, I mean, there's all sorts of things, and it's kind of fun to read because once you read one page, you just kind of flip, and I find myself like flipping all over, and it's kind of interesting because you can read one sentence and just that will stop you in your place, and you just start thinking about your life and many of these things. I mean, it's a little unique from that standpoint because I read a lot of books, and I found myself just reading a couple things and then really thinking because they're so vast. I mean, the sentence is simple, but the thinking and the meaning and what it opens up in your mind becomes really big. And that's what I really like about the book. And it talks about everything. It talks about, I guess, your adventures at, Burning Man.
That's in there.
Yeah. Things about your family and your sister and your mom. It was nice to learn your story and about you, and things about the love of your life, and just a lot of different experiences. Some of them I know about you, and some I just learned more about you. And it's kind of fun because you can open it up. Some of it's business, some of it's just life, and everything is really life. Business gets down to life. It's all personal.
Yes.
There is nothing that's business. It's all personal. So I guess those are some of the things I really liked. And a couple things that I liked in here, because I know we're running short on time, but some really neat things I liked was something you said in here about know where you want to live, know who you want to spend your time with, and know how you want to spend your time.
Right.
And I'll tell you that, to me, this should be given to like people who are leaving, graduating high school or graduating college, because you know what, your life goes by really, really quickly. I mean, I don't know where the last 30 years of my life went. Not that I'm 30, but it went by fast, and you want to make the most of it. It's just a big adventure, and have the adventures young. Do the big stuff now while you can, because once you have kids and families and obligations, it's really hard to pivot and do a lot of things unless you learn now how to design your life so you can always pivot, right?
Yes. The design your life part is key.
Yeah.
Okay, and just like this book was designed, it sounds, I mean, we've talked about a lot of stuff, right? Yeah. But it goes over that health, wealth, love, spirit, those things, and there's a structure to it. So yes, it's accessible that if you only have 5 minutes and you want to just dive in, then you can. But there's also this element of like very rigid structure to it, that like business, life stuff, like spirit, and going into that. And then like you said, those sentences, those like stop you in your tracks kind of sentences. Right. What that was typically, and this was very intentional in the book, typically, if you read a business book or a success book or a self-help book, it's very like, these are the tactics, these are the tips, the skills, the whatever, right? But you don't feel a lot.
No,
it's
you don't.
like a to-do list.
Right, it doesn't connect with your heart.
Exactly. But some of the very basics of this were some of those very heartfelt, deeply emotional things that I had written very, very personally, but said, wow, I dared myself. What how could the world be a better place if everyone did that and shared the stuff that they could just put out there? And so woven into the business and the life perspective and the self-actualization type stuff is just, you could call it lyrical or poetic type musings, okay, that just allow you to feel, and it's intended to stop you, because this book you can't just read it cover to cover. It's not very long. It's less than 300
I pretty much did
pages.
read it cover to cover, but then I went back and looked at stuff, because I really honestly I couldn't really stop reading it, because it was like it's not predictable, and that's what makes it engaging.
Good.
You know what I mean? I guess I could say that. We only have like 1 minute left. I can't believe it went by so quickly. But what's your advice to entrepreneurs, given all this? And I know we couldn't really deep dive into all the things in the book, but what's your advice to entrepreneurs?
Sure. So the advice to entrepreneurs is just to start now, but intentionally start with a goal. Like, know yourself, know your why, and know what you're gonna do to do it, and then get the people around you to support you through that, to help you maintain your commitments, and then just go for it.
All right, well said. Thank you so much, Jimmy Tomczak, and he's the author of Lakeside Tide. Thanks for being a guest on the program.
Thanks for having me.